I pulled this to ask some questions and to see if the council would join me in offering staff some direction. This report that's before us is due in a week, and it is merely a report. There's no policy decision in turning in the report. But reading through the report, at least for me, illuminated the need for some policy considerations that are upcoming, both in the priorities we set for redevelopment funding and in the adoption of the housing element that's coming to us very soon. This report makes very sadly clear that our nation's dysfunctional economy is failing the poor, the elderly, persons with disabilities, the people most in need with crucial housing needs. And that it's a failure so great at this time that Santa Monica's often heroic efforts just aren't keeping up. We're being overwhelmed. I looked at the 5-year plan on page 2. That's City Council page 54. And it points out that our Section 8 voucher payment standards have fallen so low in what HUD is willing to give us that our owner-generated listings for Section 8 are down to normally 1 to 5 units at a time, way below what the need is. Now, Alfonso Jackson has just been taken out or has resigned as the HUD chair. I think there is some mismanagement there that we're all pretty aware of. But the impact is hitting poor people here in Santa Monica, and we need to think about what we can do. Why is this particularly worrisome for this community? Well, the same set of reports, the annual plan on page 11, which is Council page 68, says, in addition, the population served by the city is extremely poor, elderly, and disabled by any indicator. Over 64% of all program participants are either elderly, disabled, or handicapped. So people are getting hurt here, even out of proportion to what's happening in the rest of the country. We're simply not meeting the need, even though we're trying to. And I think we need to recommit ourselves in some way with some policy decisions coming up. The annual plan on page 6, which is Council page 63, has a chart that shows just how serious this is. The number of people seeking housing and the number of turnovers per year are so far out of proportion that our waiting lists have become years in length. And for an elderly person to apply for a housing unit and be told, well, you're 75 years old and we might have a unit for you in 10 years, is not exactly good news. Now, if you put that in the context of the Rent Control Board report that we got on March 20th, that I hope went to all the council members, and the summary points out that we have had 54% of the previously controlled rental units that the Rent Control Board monitors go to market rate since Costa-Hawkins came into effect. And that means that on re-rental, the median rents have gone from $682,000 to $1,075 for a single and $776 to $1,436 for a one-bedroom apartment. We have lost, according to this report we just got, just short of 10,000 affordable units in this city that used to be affordable to low-income households, 80% or less. And while we're now doing inclusionary housing and we're creating new affordable units by doing that, we are nowhere near keeping up with what this community has lost. So at the very least, given all this disturbing data that is presented in this report and other things we've just recently gotten, it seems clear that we have to somehow take action to, first of all, prohibit housing discrimination based on source of income. Section 8 people are finding it difficult to get apartments because they have a voucher. It should be that you get an apartment because you have a voucher. We need to do something about that. We need to work with our Section 8 recipients who have financial difficulties. Right now, if they have financial difficulties, they often fall outside of some strict written rules. These are the people who are most likely to have financial difficulties. We need to work with them, not allow them to be evicted. We have created deed-restricted affordable housing, yet I'm not sure that as a city we have committed the resources we need to enforce that and to make sure that those deed-restricted units continue to be occupied by new tenants who are income qualified. Certainly once somebody's moved in, we don't want to be going and checking them every year to make sure they didn't have a lucky year and make $2 over the amount they're supposed to be in there. But when new tenants move in, we have to make sure that those housing providers are not turning to the market and filling those units at twice the rent when they were deed restricted when they were built. And we also have to look at the redevelopment agency priorities, which is coming to us later tonight. And I think we have to really focus our redevelopment funds on housing rehabilitation and housing creation. The state law requires a 20% commitment. I think we should be more in the 45 to 50% commitment what the needs of this community has. We'll be looking at those funding priorities later. We'll be looking at the housing element next week. But I really wanted to take the opportunity tonight, while staff was here and could comment on this, and while the council could ask questions and perhaps join me in some direction, to see if we couldn't review these issues I've just raised, some of which are currently and clearly growing in urgency based on the information we've gotten in just the few weeks. They've grown in urgency even since the draft housing element was prepared. So I want to make sure that when this draft housing element comes back to us in a couple of weeks or a month, that it acknowledges the increased threat to housing in Santa Monica. I think we need a more aggressive action plan to protect working families, the elderly, persons with disabilities, and particularly those who are already living in Santa Monica, who currently we are losing. And I can't sit here as a council member and be comfortable with that. So I hope we'll direct staff to come back with a more aggressive plan in the housing element than is represented in the draft. And I'd welcome other comments from the council.